Hello and welcome to the Phone Show. I'm Owen and here's what's coming up in today's show.
Everything you need to know about the LG G3 and why you should be keeping an eye on this formidable high-end flagship. And we check out the latest iPhone 6 leaks and ask whether Apple is taking cues from its rivals.
Hello and welcome to another phone show, John. There's so many of these, they're getting very exciting.
They are thrilling.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the LG G3, new iPhone 6 rumours. So let's dig into this. The LG G3, are you excited?
I'm very excited. LG has already confirmed the screen that we'll get on it, 5.5 inches, so almost encroaching on phablet territory. Yep. But it's the resolution which is really getting us interested. It's QHD, which is sort of also known as 2K, although
it's a bit
the
of a misnomer,
technicalities around that.
It's in between a 1080p and a 4K
yes,
TV.
Basically, it's 2560 by 1440 resolution, which
Good
gives
knowledge.
a crazy pixel density, which is going to surpass the Galaxy S5, M8, Z2 quite easily.
Yeah, and this is the thing that people are confused about, and understandably, you know, when Apple created the Retina display, it said this is as much as the human eye can see, and it kind of had a point. You know, essentially it was as sharp as you really needed it to go. That's not to say that things like the 1080p, you know, 460 PPI is a bad thing, because you know you are getting a lot more sharpness. You are getting extra sort of fewer jagged edges around zoomed in text, things like that, and that is again pushed forward with this new QHD display. There's a lot of questions around why LG is doing this. I mean, it seems to be. Is it a gimmick, do you think, or is there more to it under the surface than just we're the first to do it outside of China?
Well, there's always going to be one company that does these sort of things first, and LG is one of the firms which we look to for some more left field sort of thinking, and it's not a surprise that LG are bringing it to the fore, and it was only a matter of time. Speaking to Qualcomm, they said that the 2K screens and the 4K screens are being pushed from the consumer side more than the manufacturer side.
People
want the
next
always
thing.
wanting more. They always want better. Yes, we've got full HD, but if there is a technology out there which is better than that, why can't we have that on our phone?
Yeah.
Even if the positives aren't particularly huge, it is going to make a slight difference.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to realise is that, you know, same with 4K, it's not all about resolution. You know, it's not 4K, it's Ultra HD in TVs. And what that brings isn't just more pixels, it brings better clarity, better colour reproduction, brightness, and everything just looks more enhanced. It makes things more photorealistic, and that's what LG, I think, is going to be doing with this phone. It's going to just be making images look even more beautiful. It's not about sharpness, it's not about just packing more pixels in, although it is. But it's, you know, it's the end result that matters. It's what consumers can actually see and feel, and the sort of the tangible experience with the phone. And you know, the LG G2 had a really great screen already. You know, LG has some really good in-house technical knowledge on these kind of things, and I think that's going to really help with the, you know, QHD. I don't, you know, again, the kind of the logical part of me says I don't need this, but I'm really excited to see what happens.
Well, the G2 again, it also had a very good battery life. Even after the KitKat update, it actually improved in battery life, and that's going to be key on the G3, because that big screen, high resolution, is going to drain a lot of power, and that could be the stumbling block for the G3 if LG hasn't done enough work on the battery side of things.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important part, because if you look at any consumer survey these days, the two things that come to the top, it's number one is battery. You know, this phone has to last a day. It has to, well, no, more than a day. It has to just allow me to keep going and do what I want to do and not frustrate people. And that's a really key message. And I think you're seeing it with a lot of the marketing around the Galaxy S5, that, you know, these extreme power saving modes are really important. And with that many more pixels to run, the main worry is that it's going to just pull the end out of your battery, and it's going to be completely gone in a few minutes. But if any company can do it, I think it's LG. You know, it's got its own sort of battery in house. You know, we saw, like, you know, the pyramid battery from the previous models. It's all very clever and innovative. And you know, with our battery test, it's always LG at the top. The HTC One M8, Galaxy S5, Sony, they've all got really long, you know, day and a half compared to a day batteries. And so we could see LG return to that day level, but I don't know. It's interesting to see how this technology shakes out.
It'll hopefully be acceptable, but it's unlikely to be a standout.
And what about the rest of the specs? I mean, that's what is worrying me at this rumour point.
Yeah, the screen, as we say, we already know, but everything else seems to be a little bit confused at the moment. Looking at the processor and the power behind the scenes, we're either looking at 2 or 3 gigabytes of RAM, but the rumours are very mixed around that. Looking more into the processor, there's a few ideas floating around. Possibly LG might go with their own in-house Odin processor, an octa-core version split into 2 4-cores, one clocked at 2.3, one clocked at 1.7.
Yeah, I can see the same with the Galaxy S4 and to a degree the S5, that octa-core high-end version will will live in the, maybe in South Korea and around Asia, where there's more of an appetite for these higher power devices, and a Qualcomm version can come to the rest of the world, where, fingers crossed it's the 801 at least, if not the 805 processor, because I don't want to see the 800, which is what's been rumoured, because that's last year's device.
Yeah.
It's good on battery, but this year it's been such a step forward, and it'd be a real shame and a confusing miss for LG to go with last year's processor just when it's got the greatest screen.
I mean, we've said we'd be surprised if it did go for the 800, and that's one of the slightly older rumours out there. And yes, we are hoping for 801. 805 may still be too soon for that. I mean, there's a small outside chance, and it would really sort of add another string to the bow, but we're probably going to see 801, and that's a great chip.
But for me, the other thing LG needs to do is make sure that it does work out its design, both software and hardware. The G2 was a really good phone. It was fast. It didn't lag. It did everything you wanted it to really quickly. But the UI was just horrible. You pull down that notifications bar, and if you had say the remote activated, it was just the whole screen straight away. You couldn't even see your messages.
Yeah, it was a mess.
Yeah, and it's important people don't think that just because it's plastic it's a bad phone, but the G2 was, it was fairly averagely constructed. It was solid, and it was all one piece.
I mean, my one's got various nicks out of all the corners now and stuff. It was solid enough, but it didn't do anything special in terms of build quality.
So, unfortunately, depending on your perspective, it looks like the G3 will still be made out of plastic, but with a brushed metal effect.
Possibly. I mean, it's difficult to tell. LG recently released this week a teaser video which gives you a quick fly around the handset, although very brief, but there is obvious sort of that silver colour that we saw in the M8, that sort of stock grey silver with the brushed metal effect. So it would be very strange if they'd made it look so much like metal, but then actually went with plastic. Yeah. Because that sort of, the style of the video seemed to suggest sort of the dark blacks and the way it spun around. It was quite a premium device, but in terms of the actual styling, it looks very similar to the G2 in the various leaks and stuff, which is fine. It's a nice design. It does fit nicely in the hand. The slightly curved back helps.
Back buttons. Yeah,
the back buttons appear to be staying, but it looks like they've redesigned them a bit, maybe to make them a bit more ergonomic.
See, I like the back buttons. I thought they were a good idea. It felt different. I found it quite easy to hit. And also we had knock-on, which was a really easy system to use, where you just tap the screen twice to turn it on, and again to turn it off. Some people have implemented certain parts of this, but not the whole thing. I think LG really nailed that. Knock-on code for more security, not a big fan, but
it will be on the G3.
Yeah.
I mean, it's on the phones that launched at MWC. Yeah, so it's another option, but it's probably going to go the way of Face Unlock. It's a nice idea, but it's a bit of a gimmick.
Again, this is great. This is the best thing about the rumor mill. It's all speculation. We'll find out on May 27th, when it's going to be launched, and I think that's what's most exciting, the fact that we get to speculate around this point and actually play with it and see what's happening. But I definitely think the G3's got a real chance of being a contender. It's whether it gets the marketing push that it deserves. And LG's been okay with that, but I think it'd be really good to see a big push forward with that. The iPhone 6, still big news, even though it's not even close to being launched. Big new rumours at the moment are this is what it's going to look like. So the idea being that it'll be a bit more iPad Air-like, it'll take on a bigger screen, basically everything we expected. Is that something that you think is the right move, or should it have stuck closer to the iPhone designs of the past?
I think the iPhone does need a redesign. It basically looks the same as it did almost when the iPhone 4 came out.
Yeah.
Apple have kept that sort of metal banding around the edge and the flush front and back. So it is time for the whole ecosystem to be redeveloped, and then to keep it in line with the new design iPad Air and the iPad Mini 2. That would bring the sort of Apple mobile devices together very nicely and give people a clear indication of these are a family of products. And Apple likes to keep that sort of family of products because it encourages people to buy more of them.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The industrial design, the square edge is of its time, and I think time has passed. I really the idea of the mock-up is that it's more curved, it's more ergonomic. Again, I think this is really important. The fact that it feels nicer in the hand and all these kind of stuff is really, really the key thing for consumers nowadays who are willing to spend so much money. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that larger screen. There's no doubt Apple needs to go bigger, because whether or not you can argue as much as you want to say that this is the ideal screen size, consumers are now believing that bigger screens are better, and I like bigger screens. I think they're a great thing to have. I like being able to browse more of the web and that kind of thing. And so Apple definitely needs to get with this trend and move away from saying it needs to be one thumb enabled. You can definitely do both quite easily. The interesting thing will be that bigger screen, that better chassis, that's going to come at a cost. And Apple already has a high margin on its profits. will that mean that the iPhone 6 is even more expensive than the current models?
Well, it shouldn't be. The whole Android market is using a bigger screen,
Yeah.
so the cost of those components aren't actually going to be that high.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the Retina display, which actually has to be sort of specially manufactured just for Apple. But if they can borrow a display which is being used in other phones or borrow some of the technology, then that cuts the cost already.
There's no way Apple would use the same screen as another manufacturer.
No, not exactly the same, but the whole process.
The fabrication, yeah, I see what you mean, yeah.
It's already there. It's already mass market, so there shouldn't be an issue with supply unless they get the design wrong or something like that.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But I do think, we've heard about liquid metal in the past. Apple's had some strong work in that patent area. It was used on the SIM tray or the SIM tool, and I'd be interested to see if that happens. A whole new material for making an iPhone. It'll be expensive. The same with the sapphire screens.
Yeah.
Again, they'll be expensive, but they would add a level of premium, a kind of a differentiator in this market. Because I can imagine Apple still only going to say 4.7 inches of screen size if it doesn't make a phablet as well. So that's still small compared to, like I said, with just the 5.5 LG G3. It's still going to look minuscule in comparison, even though it's a much, much bigger phone from Apple.
Yeah.
So I think that would be interesting. I hope these mock-ups are, we see a lot of these renders, a lot of mock-ups, and they're all claimed to be exactly how it's going to look. But I hope this is something it looks like. Those bands, they're still fairly iconic with the iPhone. They'll help with antenna performance. That's quite important. So yeah, I think it should be a good move if it does land something like this.
Of course, that's not all that's been happening in the world of mobiles this week. Here are a few more stories from the smartphone grapevine. Samsung might already be set to cut the cord on the Gear 2, with another hint that the Gear Solo is on the horizon. As the name suggests, it's thought the Gear Solo will work completely independently of a smartphone, meaning you can place calls on the watch itself Dick Tracy style. We don't know much else other than that right now, although we do expect it to come running Tizen and probably priced at a similar point to the Gear 2 and Gear 2 Neo. Motorola has officially launched the low-cost Moto E in the UK, falling in below the Moto G as the company's new entry-level device. It's an absolute steal at just £89 SIM-free and packs a 4.3-inch display, dual-core Snapdragon 200 chip, a gig of RAM and a micro SD slot to boot. During the launch event, Motorola also announced a 4G and micro SD compatible refresh for its much-loved Moto G. And finally, Sam Mobile has spotted what it believes could be the very first glimpse of the upcoming Samsung Galaxy Tab S. Leaked images picked up by the site appear to show off the 10.1-inch version of the upcoming slate, which is expected to come sporting a 2560 by 1600 AMOLED display, an octa-core Exynos 5 CPU and 3 gigs of RAM. An 8.4-inch version is also rumoured to be in the works.
And that's it for another phone show. Thank you very much for joining us.
I had a really great time today. Thank you, John, for joining me.
That's quite all right, anytime.
If you want to find out more, please subscribe and do check out the new TechRadar show. It's a great format. Have you seen it, John?
I have. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So please subscribe and get more from TechRadar.
You said subscribe twice. You didn't say like and you didn't say comment.